Begin today on Daf Pei at the Mishnah. Sagt the Heilige Mishnah, Halekeyach, Peiris, Shevech, Mechaveiroi. A person buys the produce that comes from a dovecat, from his friend. So this is a dovecat that the birds are living there. And as the Rashbam explains, the nature of these birds is that throughout the year, every month of the year, they give birth to another pair of birds. Every month, another pair. And then each pair that's born, after 2 months, when they're mature enough, now they begin giving birth as well, every month. So there are many different birds that are being born over here. Now, when this person sold, and he only sold the peiris, what's being produced here in the dovecat itself, the seller wants for himself. And in order for him to be able to keep that dovecat for himself, so if it's all going to empty out, if the buyer is going to take everything, so then the dovecat will be empty and will be nothing left for the seller. But he only wants to give him the peiris. So therefore, in such a case, mafriach brecha rishona, you have to leave there the first pair that's born together with the mother, so that the mother should stay there. And the mother stays there for the first pair of birds that are born to take care of them. So now that the mother is staying there together with the first pair that's born, so then the dovecat itself will remain in its place. The word mafriach over here literally means that you allow the first pair of the birds to fly together with the mother. In other words, to continue living there together with the mother, and then the dovecat remains, and all the rest that are born afterwards, that the buyer takes. Okay, the Gemara is going to actually add to this that you have to leave a little bit more as well. Okay, we'll see in the Gemara.
But it's all potential, though. Nothing was born yet.
So that's a very good question. The Rishonim here asked the question: What does this b'chlal mean that you're selling the birds that are going to be born? We learned yesterday in the Gemara here. It speaks about selling a dova shalei bal olam. You're selling something that's not here in the world yet. So one of the pshatim that the Rishonim say is that there are birds already over here, and he's selling these birds. The Gemara gives an example when you sell a dekel peireisav. You sell this tree, I'm selling the tree, but not the actual tree itself, the tree for the fruits that it produces. So that's called balaylam. So over here, the mother, there is a bird here, and now these birds give birth, so you're selling the mother for the birth of the birds that it will give. That's called balaylam, so that's why the sale takes effect. It's one shot. And then the Mishnah says another case, a similar kind of halacha, that if a person sells peiris kaveres, he's selling the bees that are produced in a beehive. So now, the seller wants to have the beehive for himself because he wants it to produce the honey. So he doesn't really want to give away all the bees, so then he's not going to have anything left for himself. He's only selling bees that are being produced there. Now the buyer will take those bees and create his own beehives. So now, Neitel Gimel Nechilim, the buyer takes 3 swarms of bees that are born. Rashbam describes that these bees, once every 10 days or so, there's another swarm of bees that are born. So the buyer takes 3 swarms of bees, misaris. And then afterwards, misaris, there's different shatim in the Gemara what misaris means, but after that, the buyer does not take any more from the bees. You have to leave the bees now for the seller, that they should continue producing the honey in the beehive. Another case, chales devash, a person that's buying honeycombs. So he wants to have the honey from these honeycombs. So maniach beis chales. He's only buying the honey that is being produced here in these honeycombs, but the honeycombs itself, the seller wants to have the honeycomb should remain for him. So he has to leave him 2 chales, 2 of these honeycombs that should be able to continue producing honey, that he puts away. The point of here is that during the winter, Rashbam explains that these bees, they produce the honey in the summer. Then during the winter, they don't produce honey. But they have to have at least 2 honeycombs for the bees to be able to eat and to be there during the winter. And then afterwards, in the summer, they come back and they're able to produce honey again. So you have to, if you're going to take all of the chales dvash away, then he's not going to have the keren, he's not going to have the bees to be able to be there during the winter. So that you have to leave for the seller. Zeisim lokuts. If you sell an olive tree, and you're not selling the tree itself, you're selling for the buyer the rights to cut off branches of the tree. But the tree itself, the keren, the tree itself has to belong to the seller. So you can cut off branches of the tree, but you have to leave 2 branches so that the tree will then replenish. It'll grow back. The keren of the tree will be able to grow back. Okay, so now the Gemara asks on the first case of the Braise regarding the birds that are born here in this dovkat. In fact, the Gemara, what did it say in our Mishnah? That the buyer has to leave for the seller just the first pair of birds that were born, Brecha Rishayna. But Vatanya, in a Braise we learned, Brecha Rishayna Ushniya, that you have to leave the first pair that is born and the second pair that's born as well. So the way the Gemara understands this right now is that, as I mentioned, the Rashbam says once every month the birds give birth. The Rashbam actually says besides Chodesh Adar. So it sounds like the Braise is saying that you have to leave the first pair that's born, and then the next month they give birth, the original birds, the mother gives birth to another pair, and you have to leave that as well. In other words, it looks like that the mother is not going to stay there just for one pair of birds. It's only going to stay there if you leave the second pair as well. What the Mishnah said, only one pair. Rav Kahana says, no, it's not a question. That's not what this Braise means. Loi kashya, it's not a question. Ha la and ha li'ima. That here the Braise is talking about not that the mother gives birth to one pair, then a month later the mother gives birth to a second pair. What the Braise is saying is that the first pair that's born after 2 months will give birth to a pair of birds. You have to leave that pair of birds, which is the first pair that they give birth to. Okay, again, so there's the mother, then the mother gives birth to a pair of birds, and then now this pair of birds that were born after 2 months will give birth to their first pair of birds. That's what you have to keep there as well. That's what the Braise is talking about. So the Shniya is the first pair that is born to the first pair of birds that were born. There's the grandmother, there's their children, and then their children. That's what you have to keep there. That's what the Braise was saying. And Ha Li'ima, the Mishnah was saying that for the mother, for the first pair of birds that are there, you only have to keep there for the seller the first pair that's born. Any other pairs that are born later by the mother, that you don't have to keep there. So the point is that the Mishnah and the Braise are mashlim each other. The Mishnah only says part of the halacha of what you have to keep, and the Braise is adding more. Okay, and now the point over here is the reason why you have to leave not only the first pair that's born to the mother, but then you have to also leave the first pair that's born to the children, is because otherwise the first pair that's born to the mother is not going to stay there. They're going to leave. After they're born, they'll leave this place. And if they leave, then the mother will leave as well. So then it's going to be empty. Why would the first pair born to the mother stay there? Because the first pair also gave birth to their children, which are the grandchildren of the mother. So because they want to stay there for their children, so if now they're staying there for their children, so now the mother is going to stay there as well. So therefore it's going to stay there, it's going to stay full. But if you take them away, then they're not going to stay there. Okay, so now the Gemara explains this here. Let's see in the Gemara inside. So the Gemara asks, Ma'ishna ima, what's the difference here? That when it comes to the mother, so we say the mitztafsa abrata, that the mother stays there for the daughter or the children that are there, and vazuga, and also on its mate, the shafkin-in-law that we left there. In other words, for the mother we say that as long as the mother has the mate and the children, so the mother will stay there for the sake of the children. If so, why wouldn't we say the same thing regarding the first pair that's born, ihi nami, the children that are born there as well, titztafsa a'ima va'azuga. They also have someone to be with. The first pair that's born has a reason to stay there, to be there with the mother, and to be there with its mate. Why do we say that the first pair that's born needs their children in order to stay there? The first pair could stay there with the mother. So the Gemara says, no, it actually doesn't work that way. That's not the nature of the birds. Ima abrata mitztafsa. The mother will stay there with the children that are born because the mother has the rachmanis on the children to take care of the children. But this daughter over here, the first pair that's born will not stay there just because she has the company of the mother. Those birds will fly away if not for the fact that you're allowing them to have their children there and they're staying there for the rachmanis that they have on their children. Here you see this Indian, even by these birds, that the reason why the birds stay there is for the rachmanis of the children. But the other way around, that the children are staying there for the rachmanis of the mother, it doesn't work that way.
So what happens with the grandchildren? That they're going to go away because they.
So the Rashbam asks that question. The Rashbam asks that question, and the Rashbam's answer to that is that the grandchildren, even though they're going to leave because they don't have their children to take care of, but because they have a mother and a grandmother, that's enough of a reason to stay. If so, it's because they have not just a mother and a grandmother, they'll stay there. But Taisus actually disagrees. Taisus says that the pshat here in the Gemara Taka is that when it says in the Mishnah Brecha Rishayna, it means that always the first pair you have to leave. The second pair that's born, that's what you can that's what the buyer takes. But always the first pair that's born, the mother gives birth to the first pair, then the first pair gives birth to their first pair, and then the grandchildren gives birth to their first pair. The first pair always has to stay, because otherwise they're not staying there for their children. You always need to leave there that you have at least one pair of children to stay there. But that from each family it's always the first pair. But then the second pair is what the buyer could take. That's Taisus' pshat. Okay, now, the next thing it said in the Mishnah, Peiris kavedes neitel gimel uchilin umesaris. When it comes to taking from the honey, so you take 3 swarms from the bees, and then afterwards mesaris. Now mesaris, the Gemara understands at this point is that you cause these bees not to be able to give any birth further. Meaning the seller wants the bees to be busy not giving birth to other bees and creating swarms of bees. Instead, he wants the bees to be busy making honey. So, but he sold though the produce of these bees, the swarms of bees to the buyer. So he has to allow these bees to produce 3 swarms of bees and then mesaris, and then he can stop them from giving birth, and then they'll go back being busy to produce honey for the seller. So the Gemara says, "Bameh mesarson." How is he mesaris? Then they shouldn't give birth. Omer Rav Yudah Amar Shmuel b'chardal. He brings their mustard, that they eat the mustard, and this is mesaris them. So the Gemara explains how this happens. Omer b'marav mishmeid Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina lechardal mesarsosam. When they eat the chardal, the mustard, that itself is not what is mesaris them. Elamitoich shapi and chad. What happens is when they eat the mustard, their mouth becomes very sharp. It's a bad taste in their mouth. Then they go and they eat a lot of honey, and when they become very satisfied with the honey, they become busy with the honey, and they will not give birth. They're not going to be busy with giving birth and creating swarms of bees. So that's what the seller does. After 3 swarms of bees that he sold to the buyer, and he got them, so now he's mesaris that the bees should go back and producing their honey. Rabbi Yochanan says a completely different pshat in the word mesaris. Mesaris does not mean that he causes them to stop giving birth. Rather, what it means is, the buyer takes 3 swarms of bees, but he takes them skipping. He takes the first, 3rd, and 5th swarm of bees, but the 2nd, 4th, and 6th, that the seller keeps for himself. When he sells, he wants to keep the principle of these bees that are being born here for himself. He's selling him. It's understood that stam, when a person is selling swarms of bees, it means besiddus, that he's taking certain swarms, skipping 1st, 3rd, and 5th. Another pshat the Gemara brings, Masnita Tana, and a brayso we learned, based on this pshat of Rabbi Yochanan, but different, that the buyer, what does he take? Noitel gimel uchilin b'zeh chazeh. From the beginning, he takes 3 swarms, one after the other. And then mekan ve'elech, from here going onward, noitel achas u'meniach achas. He takes one and he leaves one for the seller. The Rashbami explains that these swarms of bees, the ones that are born first are better quality, the ones that are born later are worse quality. Therefore, that's the basis of here the Gemara, that he takes a good quality for himself and also bad quality, and he has to leave also for the seller as well. Okay, so the Mishnah here mentions the honeycombs that have the honey inside, that you have to leave 2 of the chalais that the bees use during the winter to be able to then come back in the summer. Okay, so here the Gemara is going to bring in a halacha of these chalais dvash benegea to whether it has the status of oichel, food, or mashke, or a liquid, regarding the halacha of tumah. If the honey that's inside this chalais dvash is not something that's being used for food at all, but it's just being used by the bees eat from it, so then it doesn't have a status of food or liquid for a person. So then it's not makabel tumah. It has to be something which is kol ha'oichel asher ya'ochel, that Rashbam here brings. It has to be food. Okay, so now on this, the Gemara says, Omer Av Kahana, dvash b'keveres, when you have honey inside the honeycomb, eini yaitze midei ma'achal oilam. So it has a status of food, and it remains in that status of food forever. Okay, so the honey in the honeycomb is edible, and it remains in that status of food. And the Rashbam says, unless he mamish clearly and explicitly says that this honeycomb is not going to be used for food, it's dedicated for the bees. But otherwise, without him explicitly dedicating it to remain for the bees, it's considered to be food, and it's makabel tumah. Or Taisus here says a little different. Taisus says that Imamish has to do something physical to the honey, that it should not be roy for human consumption. and then it's not going to be makabel tuma. But otherwise, the honey in the honeycombs is makabel tuma. Says the Gemara Alma, I see from here, Kasava, the Rav Kahana holds, the person doesn't have to have a special machshave that he wants to take it out and use it and eat it, and only then will it be makabel tome. But the honey inside the honeycombs is fit for eating, and therefore it's going to have the halach of being makabel tome. So the Gemara asks on this, Meisvei, we learned in the Brisa, Dvash bekeveres, the honey in a honeycomb, Einoi, loy oichol, v'loy mashke. It does not have the status of food or of a liquid that would be makabel tome. So the Gemara gives two answers. Amar Abaye explains what Rav Kahana said, this brisa that says that the honey that's in the honeycomb is for the bees, and therefore it's not a food, it's not a liquid for a person, that's those two honeycombs that we spoke about in the Mishnah that's needed for the bees, that it stays there. That's not the honey you take out for human consumption. It stays there for the bees for the winter as well. That's the honey that's dedicated for the bees. That's not a eichel and not a mashke. But Rav Kahana was talking about all the other honey. All the other honey, that's food. Rava says a different shot, that this brayse is not only talking about two of the honeycombs that remain for the bees. This brayse is Rabbi Eliezer. He goes according to Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Rabbi Eliezer holds that b'chlal, any of the honey that's inside the honeycombs cannot be makabel tomeh. And here the Gemara will bring a Mishnah. We had this before in the Masechta actually. And this Mishnah tells us that honey inside of a honeycomb is considered to be part of karka, part of the ground. Mechubel karka, exactly. So anything that's mechubel karka is not makabel tomeh. So what does the Mishnah say? That nan kaver is divided, the honey in a honeycomb. Rabbi Eliezer oimer harehika karka has the halacha like part of the ground itself, and therefore different halachas apply. Kaislan ala prusbul, that you can write a prusbul on this. This is by Shmita, which absolves the loans, and Chachamim were misaken in of a prusbul. As we learned, prusbul is only in a case where there's a karka that the borrower has. So a honeycomb is considered to be karka. It's mechubel karka. Ve'enem makabel is tumeh b'mekayma, and it's not makabel tumeh when it's in its place, because it's part of the karka. And v'haroidem imena b'Shabbos, someone that removes the honey from this honeycomb on Shabbos, chayav chatas. You chayav chatas. It's like the malacha of kaitzer. You're reaping or you're detaching something from its source where it is connected to the ground. However, Chachamim disagree. Ein kaisnol prusbul. You can't write a prusbul on it. Ve'enika karka. It's not part of karka. Makabel is tumeh b'mekayma. Therefore, it is makabel tumeh. If you remove the honey from the on Shabbos, you'll be potter. It's not like you're detaching something from the ground itself. Now, the Gemara explains, Amar Rabbi Elazar explained what's the source of the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer that it's mechubel karka. My time with Rabbi Eliezer, the chsiv, vayit baloisa b'yaris hadvash, and he was toivel his stick into a forest of honey. So the pasuk refers to honey as a forest of honey. Why is the pasuk saying that honey is like a forest? The expression of this pasuk is teaching you, just like a trees in a forest, if you pull out or detach anything from the trees that are connected to the ground, you chayav chatas. So to the honey, if you remove the honey, you chayav chatas. So the point that Gemara is saying over here is the brayse before that said that the honey in the honeycomb is not makabel tumeh is because it's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, and it's part of karka. Rav Kahana though paskins like the Chachamim that it's not part of karka, therefore it's a eichel and it's makabel tumeh. Okay, so the Gemara here asks different shilas over here on this machlokes here how to understand what Rav Kahana said. So the Gemara asks, it says in the Brayse, Meisvei, Dvash Hazov Mikavarte. What's if the honey is flowing out of the honeycomb? It's not inside, it's flowing out. Einoi loy oichel v'loy mashke. So this honey here is not oichel and it's not mashke. So the Gemara says, Bishloi mala baye niche. According to the Abaye, we can understand why this honey does not have a status of food, even though it's flowing out. Because according to Abaye, just like he explained before, that the brayse that says that it's not a food is because it's talking about those two honeycombs that is needed for the bees in the winter. So this brayse says, well, even after it's flowing out, it's referring though to those two honeycombs that is needed for the bees. But however, according to Rava, that says that the only reason why it's not a noichel and a mashke is because it's mechubel karka, it's like part of karka. So kashya. So it's a question over here. In this brayse, though, it's talking about the honey that's flowing out of the honeycombs. So if it's flowing out, it's not part of the karka. It's not mechuber to the karka anymore. So the Gemara says, no, this brayse is speaking about the honey that flowed out, but it flowed onto the ground. It flowed onto a place, onto a vessel that's despicable, that it's not edible. Therefore, it's not oichel or hamashke. Ravacha bar Yaakov Amar, Ravacha bar Yaakov says a similar thing, kagon shezav al gavi kashkashin. It flowed out onto a straw or onto pieces of wood that make it all dirty, and it's impossible to sift out and to take out the honey and to eat it. So therefore, it won't be makabel tumah. Meis the Gemara asks from another brayse. It says dvash bekavartei, the honey and the honeycomb, ein lo yochav lo mashke. It doesn't have the halacha of food or a liquid. But then the brayse says chishav olav lachile. If the person has the machshava, he thinks that he wants to designate it and use it for food, then mitame tumas oichlin lemashkin. Then again mitame tumas oichlin and also lemashkin mitame tumas mashkin. If his thought was that he wants to use it as a food, then the halachas of tumah that relate to food will apply. If he thought he wants to use it as a liquid, the halachas of tumah as relates to liquid will apply. So again, the Gemara asks, Bishloime la Abaye niche. According to the Abaye that explained before, that we're talking specifically about the two honeycombs that are designated for the bees. So over here as well, it's talking about the two honeycombs designated to the bees. So unless the person had the machshove to use it for himself, it's not going to be food. It's going to be for the bees. So once he has that machshove, though, now it becomes dedicated either for food or for a mashke. However, according to Rava, how are we going to explain this? According to Rava, he says that we're talking here about, according to Rabbi Eliezer, the machshava doesn't help. If it's mechuber lekarka, something that's mechuber lekarka, your machshava doesn't change that. It doesn't help anything b'chlal to make it a oichel and a mashke. It's mechuber lekarka. So if it's part of karka, how's the Bryce saying that your machshava changes anything? And on the other hand, according to Rav Kahana, that holds like the Chachamim, that it's not mechober lekarka, you don't even need your machshava. It's automatically oichel and mashke. So what is this brayse saying that your machshava helps? So the Gemara answers, Amalach Rove Tritz Hachi. You have to explain it. The brayse as follows: Chishav of lachile, that even if he thinks that he wants to use it for food, and if he thinks lemashkin, he wants to use it for liquid, it's not going to be metamet tumas mashkin. So the way to read the brayse, let's go back a second to the lashon of the brayse when it says dvash bekavartei einu loy oichel v'loy mashke. Then the brayse goes on to say chishav olav la'achile. It's not saying that if you had that thought, it will be metamet. The brayse is just describing. It does not have the halacha. The machshava does not work, not for oichel and not for mashke. That if you would have thought for oichel that it should become oichel, it doesn't work for that. That's what the brayse is trying to say. Exactly like the way Rava explained it, that this brayse is going according to Rabbi Eliezer, that it's mechuber lekarka. So no machshava helps to change the status of the dvash. Tanya Kva say that Rav Kahana, the Gemara concludes that we learned, like Rav Kahana said, dvash bekavartei, the honey in a honeycomb, metamet tumas oichlin shalev machshava, that it will be metamet tumas oichlin even without the person having any thought to use it for himself. So again, this is either according to Abaye's opinion that it's talking about all the honey besides that honey that's designated for the bees, the two ones that it needs for the winter, or he's passing like the Chachamim that say that the honey is not mechuber lekarka. The Gemara goes to the next part of the Mishnah. Zeisim, when it comes to olive trees, lokuts. So if you sold the branches, that the buyer can cut the branches, maniach shtei grufiyos, you have to leave for the seller two of the branches so that it'll replenish. Yes, basically pruning the tree. You're giving the buyer the rights to prune the tree.
And he's taking hours with it.
Yeah. So you have to leave for the seller two branches that the tree should replenish. Otherwise, it's all going to die. And he didn't sell him the tree itself. So Tan Rabbanan and Abraisa, we learned about different trees. A person buys the tree from himself, from his friend, lokuts, to cut, to prune branches. So how do you cut? Makbiyam and akarka tefach. You can cut from the tree, but you have to leave a tefach from the ground that you have to leave in order for it to replenish the kaitzitz, and then you can cut. But the tefach you have to leave there. Now, if you're cutting from a besulas hashikma, a sycamore tree, but this is a young sycamore tree, so for that, in order to replenish, you have to leave gimel tfachim. You have to leave 3 tfachim from the ground. Sadan hashikma, an older sycamore tree, it was once pruned before. So for that, in order for it to replenish, it's enough to leave it base tfachim, to leave 2 tfachim. Bekanim or begefanim, by reeds and by vineyards, mina pekak olamayla. So you have to leave a pekak that's in the branches that has a certain pekak. I'm not trying to translate it in English. It has like a joint where it connects one part to another. From there, you have to leave in order for it to replenish. B'dikalim u'ba'arazim, when it comes to palm trees.
Grafting it with it?
No. In the actual branches itself, or in the vineyards itself, there's a pekak in the branch that from there going down, you have to leave it. Huh?
Like I guess where it spreads out from or something.
Yeah. B'dikalim u'ba'arazim, by palm trees or by cedar trees. So over here, if you were sold the branches of this tree, chayfer or misharesh, you can take whatever branches you want. You can even dig and uproot the whole tree. Lefi she'en gizon machlef, because over here, even if when you leave the trunk of the tree, it anyways does not replenish. So when the buyer bought this, so then it's understood that the tree is not going to produce again. So therefore, there's no point in leaving anything from the tree for the seller because it's not going to reproduce again anyways. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to ask on different details of this brisa. First, the Gemara asks, what did we say here? Besula sashikma, when it comes to this young sycamore tree, gimel tvachim. You have to leave 3 tvachim. So the Gemara asks, gimel tvachim beyinon, do you need 3 tvachim in order for it to replenish? But v'ramini, I'll ask you from what it says in a Mishnah regarding Shemitah. And Shemitah, you're not allowed to do any work to improve the trees that are growing. So the brisa there says, "Ein koitzitzim besulas hashikma b'shvius." You're not allowed to prune and cut the branches of this sycamore tree in Shemitah. Because this is considered to be work that you're doing, that it will prune the tree. You're basically pruning it, and it'll regrow, it'll replenish and grow better. So this is work that you're doing on Shemitah. You're not allowed. Now, Rabbi Yehuda says it depends. Kedarkoi osir. If you're pruning the tree the way it's usually pruned, that's not allowed. So what do? Elamagia yutfachim. That if you're going to cut from branches, once you're leaving from 10 tfachim above the ground, and the kaitzitz, and you're cutting there, so that's not the way it's usually pruned. Oi goimim me'ima oretz. Or you cut it all the way down to the ground. So then that's not something which is improving the tree. So the Gemara says, what do you see over here? When a person prunes this tree and all the way, cutting the branches all the way down to the ground, so then that's not good for the tree. But if you're not cutting it all the way down to the ground, then it is pruning it will be beneficial for the tree and it will reproduce. So why did we say here before in the Braisa that you have to leave tafke 3 tfachim from this tree when the buyer gets the prune from it? Amar Abaye answers and explains as follows: Gimel tfachim mailila. When you prune the sycamore tree and you leave 3 tfachim of it, and that's where you're pruning it from, that's the best for the tree. When you prune it all the way down to the ground, vade kashila. That's definitely not good. That's definitely going to kill the tree. Now, mikan ve'eleich, if you're pruning the tree and you're not pruning it all the way down to the ground, it's somewhere between from let's say 1 tefach to 3 tefachim. So loy makshi kashila, it's not going to kill the tree completely. It's not completely bad for the tree, but valav aloya mailila. But it's not the best for the tree either. And the same thing also from between 3 tefachim to 10 tefachim. If you prune it in that way, it's also sort of in between. It's not the best way to prune the tree, but it's also not going to kill the tree completely. So therefore we say as follows. Gabe shviyes, when it comes to Shemitah, of dinan midi, you only are allowed to prune it in such a way, devade kashila, that it's definitely going to be bad for the tree. Because otherwise, if in any way it's still going to be somewhat beneficial for the tree, what you're doing is work. Is work in the field, the tree is gonna replenish. However, when it comes to a sale, and you have to leave the tree itself for the seller of dinim midi, the vade mailila. Over here, the seller wants you to only prune his tree in such a way that it's definitely going to be beneficial for him. You have to do it in the proper way, which is the best way for the tree, and that is when you prune it and you leave 3 tfachim from the ground for the seller. So you do it the best way for the tree. Another thing the Gemara asks on the Braisa, it said, "B'dekolim u'ba'arazim," when it comes to palm trees and cedar trees, chayfuru misharesh, you can dig and you can even uproot the roots, lefisha en giza machlef, because anyways the trunk of the tree will not replenish. So the Gemara asks on this: "Ve'eres, a cedar tree, en giza machlef, is it true that the trunk, that if you leave it, it's not going to regrow again branches?" But Rabbi Bar Lulaini dash in the pasuk. What's the meaning of the pasuk where it says Tzadik katoma yifrach? A tzaddik grows like a palm tree. Ke'erez balavonin yizge, and he grows tall like the cedar tree in Levanon. Why is it comparing a tzaddik to both a palm tree and a cedar tree? If it says he's compared to a palm tree, why are we comparing him to a cedar tree? If he's compared to a cedar tree, why are we comparing him to the palm tree? So it explains, if it would only compare the tzaddik to the cedar tree and not the palm tree, I would say, that just like a cedar tree does not produce fruits, it's a tall, nice tree, but it doesn't produce good wood, but not fruits. So to a tzaddik does not produce any peiris. And that's not true. The tzaddik is the one that does the mitzvahs, which mitzvahs are compared to peiris. Therefore, the pasuk says that a tzaddik is compared to the palm tree that produces fruits. If it would say that tzaddik is compared to the palm tree, and it would not say that it's compared to the cedar tree, I would say, just like a palm tree, that when you prune it, then it does not regrow, it doesn't replenish. So to a tzaddik, he does not replenish when you prune his branches. And therefore, it says in the pasuk Erez to say that by a tzaddik, even the Rashbam here brings the pasuk Sheva Yipol Tzaddik V'Kam. Even if a tzaddik fails, but nevertheless he gets up again. He does tshuva and he replenishes and he actually come to a higher level than he was before. The Alter Rebbe and Tanya speaks about this. When a tzaddik falls, the Eibusher brings it about that it should happen in order for him to go even deeper and higher. That's a comparison to the palm tree and the cedar tree. So we clearly see here in this drasha that the nature of the cedar tree is that it does replenish. That's the point of why we compare Dafka the tzaddik to the cedar tree. So the Gemara here says, this brisa that says that the cedar tree does not replenish, it's speaking about Bishar Mini Arazim. It's other types of cedar trees. There are different types of trees that are all called in the general category of cedar trees. Here the Gemara brings a bunch of these trees. I can't translate to you for them what they all are, but the Gemara brings Kedraba Baravone, the Amar Rabba Baravone, Amri Beirav, Yud Mini Arazim. There are 10 different types of cedar trees. Shanemar, the pasuk says, Etein Bamidbar, Erez, Shita, Vahadas, Ve'etz, Shemen, Ishim. Ve'etz, Shemen. Second, what's the continuation of the pasuk? Asim, Ba'arava. And then the pasuk there continues, Beroish, Tidar, Ta'ashur, Yachtav. So it mentions here all these trees that are all in the category of cedar trees. So Erez, the Gemara teaches what these trees are. Erez is what's called Arza in Aramaic. Shita is Turnisa. Hadas is Asa. Eitz, Shemen is Afarsima. And Beroish, that it says in the pasuk is Barti, and in the pasuk when it says Tidar is Shaga, and Ta'ashur is Shurvina. Those are the trees. Okay, now the Gemara now asks, but Hani Zayin have it? These are actually only 7 different kinds of trees. So why did Rabbi Baravona say that there are 10 types of cedar trees? They added another 3. Alaynim, Almainim, and Almaigim. Another 3 kinds of cedar trees. Alaynim are Butni, Almainim is Bluti, and Almaigim is Ksisa. Let's just finish with the Mishnah here. Ikeda Omri. Others say that what are the 3 trees that they added? Arainim, Armainim, and Almaigim. Arainim is Ari, Armainim is Dulvi, and Almaigim is Ksisa. Those are the 10th kind of cedar trees. So some of these cedar trees do not replenish after you prune it. And that's the one that the Brisa says that if you sell, you're able to cut down all the branches and even uproot it because it's not going to replenish.